books are cool on this episode of Attack of the Killer Podcast.
Attention planet Earth and beyond. Stay tuned for Attack of the Killer Podcast. 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 That's time for the show. Yay.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I am Insane Mike, the host of Attack of the Killer Podcast, and we are here live at Lib Con 2.
Dos.
Excuse me?
It's Spanish for two.
Oh, and so it's awesome to be here. Now, if you have not heard of our show before, I will tell you a little bit about it. What we are is we are a horror movie podcast. Group of friends, we get together, we talk about the one thing we all have in common, and that is horror movies. And so with this episode being live here at LibCon 2, here at the Iowa City Public Library, we are going to be talking about movies based on classic literature. So that'll be cool. Now, where can you hear Attack of the Killer Podcast? Well, I'll tell you. You can hear Attack of the Killer Podcast on our very own podcast network called the Prescribed Films Podcast Network. That's right, the Prescribed Films Podcast Network. And there's a ton of cool shows on the network, 17 different shows, including ourselves. We're kind of the flagship of the network, but there's a lot of great stuff on there. You know, you can hear all kinds of discussions about different, like movies and television shows, all kinds of pop culture goodness on the network.
TV horror hosts.
Yep. TV movie horror hosts, all kinds of cool stuff. Yep. You can check out the network and find our show on the network at thepfpn.com. I'll spell that for you. That's thepfpn.
How do you spell the?
THE.
Took you a second.
Took a second. Longer than it should.
Dot. DOT. No, you don't spell the word dot.
No.
Com. COM.
You screwed it out.
People are going to be so lost
So lost.
on the World Wide Webs. Oh, and I should mention, too, we openly discuss the films within our topic that we pick, and so there may be spoilers. So heads up there. What else do I have to say before we get into it? I want to take a quick moment and give a shout out to our sponsor of our show, Shudder.
Shudder.
Now, if you don't know what Shudder is, it's an online streaming service where you can, it's a cool streaming channel where you can check out, it's got tons of horror movies, TV series. It's awesome. It's a really cool. They're a sponsor of our show, and if you are not familiar with Shudder and haven't checked it out, it's only $4.99 a month, $49.99 for a full year. And since you were cool enough to come here to our live show, I'll hook you up. I'll give you a free month. How's that?
That's pretty special.
That's right. So if you put in our special promo code AOTKP, you can get a month of Shudder for free. So, since we are here live at LibCon 2, we're going to talk about classic literature and classic horror movie literature turned into movies. But first, I should probably introduce you to the podcast crew. First up, he read a book once, Jason Bollinger.
That's maybe once. That makes me really nervous about this episode, for I am not a reader, and books are hard. And so this will be interesting for me.
And also, his high school book report was on Shakespeare, and he wrote it in pen because he couldn't decide which pencil to use. To be or not to be. Tad Good, everybody.
Oh my gosh.
So bad. Hi, yeah, and his son is here, so it's very fitting that you're doing dad jokes.
I always do dad jokes, and that's what you can hear. That's the level of comedy you can get on Attack of the Killer Podcast. So, yeah, classic horror movie literature turned into horror films. When I think of a topic like that, the first thing that springs to my mind is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Which has been, still being done today. It's been done countless times. And, the most famous one that everybody sort of knows is the Universal Monsters version. And I've always sort of found it fascinating that sort of like, they say like Santa Claus was almost created by Coca-Cola, the image that we have with the big guy with the rosy cheeks. I feel like Universal created what we know as Frankenstein's monster. It's not described like that in the book, but we picture him as having green skin, even though it was the original Universal's black and white. We know he has green skin, bolts on the neck, flat head. Jack Pierce sort of created what we know, and it's almost jarring to see, how Hammer's portrayed him or other movies, because they set the standard, and that's what we're sort of used to seeing.
Yeah. You mentioned Jack Pierce, the guy who did the original makeup for it, and so that's the classic look, the flat top head, and all that jazz. There's some interesting Frankenstein tropes. I know I talk about this all the time when it comes to zombies, and when we bring up Return of the Living Dead and how that is the movie that established zombies eating brains, and no other movie has done that. Be it everybody knows that zombies eat brains. And it's just weird how that has leaked into the culture, and equally so with Frankenstein. Like the character of Igor, which is synonymous with the Frankenstein lore, that character didn't even get introduced. I don't know if he's in the original book or not. I don't know if he's in Mary Shelley's book, but in the movies, he didn't get introduced until the third Universal Frankenstein monster movie, and it was. I don't remember. I didn't write it down either. The original name of the lab assistant from the first two Frankenstein movies, but in I think it's Son of Frankenstein's the third one, and the assistant of Igor was played by Bela Lugosi in that one, and in the fourth one, Ghost of Frankenstein. So that character didn't even, and they don't even spell it in the traditional way we think of Igor to be spelled. They spell it with a Y. So
right.
So I find that fascinating, and the fact that everybody's portrayal, the modern man's portrayal of Frankenstein is always the arms out and everything. That whole concept didn't get introduced until. And it was only done really once in those Universal monster movies. I think it was Ghost of Frankenstein or maybe House of Frankenstein, which at that point it was either Lon Chaney Jr. I think it was Lon Chaney Jr. But the reason why he did the arms out and everything is because the monster goes blind in that movie. So when he's reaching out like that, it's because he's blind. He can't see where he's going, and that's the whole reason for this. So it really has nothing to do with the monster per se, but yet that is our everyday perception of the monster.
That's pretty crazy. It seems like it's part of the monster. It has nothing to do with him being blind, but
yeah.
Well, is that sort of the first? Would you say one of the first franchises that had sequels after it, Frankenstein? I mean. I can't think of anything really earlier that had multiple sequels.
Well, I don't know which sequel came first, Bride of Frankenstein or Dracula's Daughter, but it'd be one of those two, because Dracula came before Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But I don't know when the sequel started.
But like with Bride, it's almost, if not bigger than the original, because she's just as infamous as Frankenstein's monster. So It's interesting that. When you go back and watch it, it's not what you sort of have in your head if you're not familiar with Bride of Frankenstein. Going back and watching it, there's a lot of comedic elements to it. There's some really weird stuff like the little, the mini characters that are on the desk. Some of those special effects are really cool. Going back and watching that, but it's tonally very different from the first movie. The first movie's very simple. They create the monster. Goes bad as you expect, and ends in tragedy. But the second one's a lot more complex, and it's interesting. Sort of like they've done with some of Stephen King stuff. He writes one book, they base a movie on it, it's successful. We got to make another one, even though there's not another book. How many Children of the Corn movies? Based on one very short story by Stephen King. It wasn't even a full novel, and it has tons of movies. So. Frankenstein spawned one film that's turned into a whole franchise, and it's still going, and there's spin-offs and parodies, and
Yeah.
I mean, obviously probably my favorite Frankenstein movie is Young Frankenstein.
That was number one on my list too.
Yeah,
Young Frankenstein.
it's got to be my favorite adaptation. It's loosely based on that story. It's more based on the movie, based on the book. You know what I mean? It's sort of making fun of the Universal tropes, but they do it so lovingly, and it's so well done. To me, it's just perfect.
That's why like Mel Brooks is gonna be forever like the master of like film parody and film satire. Like Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, Spaceballs, but Young Frankenstein in particular, he even went so far as to get some of the original some of the original sets and some of the original crew from those Universal days that knew how to shoot in black and white. Because you take for granted that the fact that there is a technique to shooting in black and white. You can't just shoot any old thing in black and white and have the same like depth of field that you get in most black and white movies, or even just that classic Universal look and sound. Even if you go back and watch Young Frankenstein, it's got that like that I don't know what you'd call that sound, that more distant sound that you get in those classic films. So yeah, and for when I was a kid, for the longest time, I thought it was part of the Universal franchise. It's that close.
It's definitely the one I rewatch the most. I mean, if you don't, I guess it's considered its own thing, separate. Obviously from it's not done by Universal and it's not part of that series. But if we're talking adaptations of that classic story, that's funnily enough the one I watch the most. I would say I watch it like every year, and I've seen the original Frankenstein and Bride several times. I don't watch the sequels a whole lot. I like the Hammer stuff, but it's just synonymous with Halloween season,
Yeah.
And there is an earlier version of Frankenstein that was recently sort of restored, and you can actually, I think, find it on YouTube. Have you seen that one? It's like sepia tones, and I think it's it's really early. It's,
the original silent film?
Yeah.
1910 was the original film.
And
that's the
it's very eerie, and it's sort of a brother or sister film to Nosferatu in a way that it looks very similar. It's sort of, high contrast, sepia, and that could just be, just a bad transfer or whatever. But
that for the longest time was kind of like a lost film. It was like
Right.
the Ark of the Covenant as far as like movies go. trying to find a decent print, a full print of that even. So the fact that there's any existence of that to this day is amazing. So. And it's such a different, like the monster itself is so different looking than what you see in the Universal films.
Well, that's what the thing is interesting to me too, is that Universal, obviously long removed from now. They're very old, but those looks are still copied to this day. Not just Frankenstein, but the vampire, with the Widow's Peak, the Bela Lugosi look of that character was not, and that's another, I don't mean to move on to Dracula, but it's another thing where they created sort of a character for a monster that necessarily wasn't pulled from the book, and that's just become what a vampire or Dracula is. Every Halloween you see a kid dressed up with painted on Widow's Peak, and and that's loosely based, evolved over time, but Bella's version of Dracula is definitely his own, and it's sort of created the standard, just like the Boris Karloff Frankenstein monster.
Yes, and the interesting thing, one of the things I like about the original Dracula, and that version of Dracula was a stage play first. And Bela Lugosi was kind of the guy to play Dracula in that original stage play. So when you watch the movie, Todd Browning's movie, it's cinematically not very good.
It's very stage play.
It's very flat, very It's a stage play just with a camera set up. But then, like what they did at Universal is they wanted a Spanish version as well. So they would shoot the American version throughout the day, and then when that cast and crew would go home, the Spanish cast and crew, completely different cast, would come in at night and shoot the Spanish version. Now, if you watch that Spanish version, it's far more cinematic. The camera actually moves, and and there's close-ups and stuff like that. Something you'd see more in an actual film. So it's quite interesting. As much as that I think the Bela Lugosi version is synonymous because of Bela Lugosi, because the movie itself is pretty flat. But if you watch the Spanish version, it's far more cinematic.
Before we move on from Frankenstein, do you guys have a modern version that you like? I
actually really think Victor Frankenstein is underrated with Daniel Radcliffe.
Dang it, I have that, and I just haven't watched it yet.
I saw it in theaters, and maybe it was because my expectations were so low, but I love Daniel Radcliffe. I thought, outside of the monster himself, which it's not really, this one's more based on the two characters that are creating the monster, more so, Victor himself, rather than the monster, that, you don't really get a taste of the monster till the very end, and it's sort of...
It's not the focus.
Well, yeah, but it's the design itself. I feel like if you stray too far from that, Boris Karloff version, you have to. People will get upset if you do too close because you can't, because Universal is very.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
But you can't stray. It has that very much like Van Helsing, where he has like the stitches and that is created in a lab, and it's probably more realistic to what the book would be, that you're creating a human out of another human, because. Jack Pierce obviously set the standard, but that monster doesn't look like someone that would be created out of other people. I don't really even, it doesn't really make sense that he has a smooth, it's perfectly smooth and comes up and has a hard edge, and they obviously exaggerated it for the Munsters, like Herman Munster. Yeah. Talk about, went from the book to Frankenstein to creating a sitcom series on TV where a Frankenstein's monster played the father to a little, werewolf child, and it's so crazy to think how that evolved to that, there's a talking version of Frankenstein's monster who does comedy bits, and he's a big, clumsy idiot on the show. It's awesome. Like, we don't have stuff like that on TV anymore. But that's another one of my favorite, I guess technically adaptations, but it's so far removed from the original novel. It's based just like Young Frankenstein is based more on the Jack Pierce makeup and that character, making fun of that, than necessarily the origin story.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite modern?
Speaking of being super far removed, I was just now thinking, would you consider May derivative enough?
May sprung to my head, and I was going to bring that up for, especially for you.
I was going to say, do you consider any time someone creates a person out of other people?
Right.
I guess it's got to be from that.
Right, that book started it. So
I know it kind of segues into another author, but Bride of Reanimator is pretty...
Yeah.
Definitely...
Inspired. Definitely inspired by that.
Well, you want to know my favorite modern Frankenstein?
What's your favorite modern Frankenstein, Mike?
Frankenhooker.
Oh, yeah, Frankenhooker for sure. The last, obviously, one that I love is Bogus.
Monster Squad.
Yeah. And
so good.
Which doesn't really tell the tale,
it doesn't.
But it's got the monster.
Yeah, it sort of relies on you knowing those characters and where they came from and their origin stories. But that's really the only movie that's sort of been able to use those, almost completely reuse those designs. I mean, they're the most faithful to that original.
As close as they could get without getting sued.
Right. And it's
vibe of it. And
right.
Vibe of all the Universal monsters.
Right. Yeah. And, just watching, not to get too far off track, but watching, Wolfman's Got Nars, a documentary, and talking to the special effects makeup guys and how they had to redesign, Gilman and some of these characters that were a little too close. They, riding that line of how close can we get to these designs, but you want to have recognizable characters because you instantly recognize the bolts in the neck and the flat top of the head. That's Frankenstein's monster. The cape, I mean, they play they're almost Halloween costume versions, because they've slowly evolved. I mean, Bella had a little bit of that widow's peak, but now it's exaggerated in every version of it.
Yeah.
To the point where when kids dress up, they paint it black on their forehead and with a white face. Like, that's not at all how he was, but it gets played up like that to the point where it's, built up over time.
Yeah, it keeps getting longer and longer.
Yeah.
It almost looked like they should be a member of the Misfits.
Yeah.
Do you guys watch horror movies? Do you guys watch scary movies at all? Have you ever seen The Monster Squad? Not seen that one? It's good. It's really good. And it's a bit more family friendly. It came out in like the time of Goonies, when Goonies came out. And it's kind of like the Goonies meets the classic monsters, because it's got Wolfman, Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and the Mummy. And it's really funny. It's a good movie, yeah, and pretty appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, a bunch of kids on a adventure, and they end up having to fight against the monsters.
But it's something that kind of is a little bit for everybody. For us adult horror movie fans, it's cool because it's got really cool looking makeup on the monsters and stuff, and stays true to the mythos of all those characters. And but it's a bunch of kids kind of sort of fighting monsters. Yeah, kids on bikes, which is a popular subgenre today.
We're all back to that with I'm sure you guys know Stranger Things. It's heavily, I would say that Stranger Things gets a lot from Monster Squad.
Yep.
Yeah,
Sure.
Monster Squad is one of those movies that Stranger Things adapted from.
I think so.
Yeah. So where are we on?
Modern Frankenstein is where we were talking.
Oh
I think
yeah.
we should
Did you
move
say
on.
yours, or was yours May?
Yes, let's go with May and Bogus.
At Monster Squad. Okay. So then, so getting into some other authors, like we consider for classic literature, there's Edgar Allan Poe.
Kind of a biggie.
Kind of a biggie. But what's interesting about Poe is that there's a lot of adaptation of his stuff, and it's usually basically maybe 4 or 5 of his stories tops.
Right, yeah,
But
they get
100
recycled over
movie-
and over again.
Yeah. But the thing is I feel like there's so many adaptions of Poe's work is because his stuff is public domain.
Right, and
So
that's,
you can-
don't have to pay for it.
Exactly. So you can have the name recognition, and
So I assume we'll be doing 1 or 2 soon too. Prescribed
should.
films. Yeah,
we should.
for real.
So, favorite Poe adaptation?
I don't want to go first.
Oh.
Okay, you can go first.
Oh gosh. Well, oh man, I watched a couple just this week.
You did your homework, I didn't.
I did homework, and I remember watching this in school. Believe it or not, we watched a couple old Vincent Price films.
See, how not fair is that? When I was in school, we had to watch To Kill a Mockingbird, blah, blah, blah. But he got to watch Vincent Price movies in school. That's nonsense. That's not fair.
It's not, but that's
He had a school of 5 people, so I
one
guess.
of my. Yeah, that's true. We could do a lot more things, but I just watched The Pit and the Pendulum again, and it was freaking fantastic.
One I think is that's underrated. There's an episode of Masters of Horror called The Black Cat,
Oh yeah,
and I really enjoy that.
Was that the one? Was that the one directed by Stuart Gordon?
Yeah,
Okay.
and has what's his name from Reanimator? I'm drawing a blank.
Jeffrey Combs.
Jeffrey Combs, yeah, is the lead, and he plays.
Oh yeah, and he plays
Edgar-
Poe in it, right?
Yeah, he plays Edgar Allan
That's
Poe
right. I
himself.
have seen that one.
And
yeah.
to me, they did that John Cusack movie, and
Did you see it?
I didn't see the whole movie. No,
Okay.
I've seen it was one of those things I caught at 2 a.m. on Stars, so I watched part of it. But I feel like when I watch that one, I see just John Cusack playing Poe, where I felt like Jeffrey Combs really did. He's a great actor, so he sold
it
it.
was all in
He
on
was
the-
Poe.
If
yeah.
they did another version, there eventually will be another, especially with biopics being so popular right now. They need to do a better Poe movie,
And again, they could easily do it, and not pay any royalties.
right?
It's public domain.
Yeah, one of the, like you said, one of the most recognizable names. So I don't see why, eventually it'll come down. I guess it hasn't really stopped a lot of studios when one flops, just try it again. But I don't think, was it just called Poe? What the John Cusack?
It was called The Raven.
Oh, The Raven.
Oh,
Yeah,
The
which I
Raven.
think had out of all of the Poe work that was adapted into the film, it had the least amount to do with the Raven.
Right.
Like it had
Just a
nods
catchy
to a lot
title.
of the other stuff, but
Just
I
a
don't
catchy
think,
title that
yeah,
they
well,
wanted.
recognizable title.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what I'm talking about. Because like my favorite Poe adaptation, well, I'm gonna say two. I was gonna let you have the one because I thought you were gonna say it.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, number one for me is Two Evil Eyes.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
what
It was like early 90s. I think it was like 90, 91 when it came out. And shot in Pittsburgh. Two stories in the movie. One directed by George Romero. So, of course, it has to be my favorite Poe adaptation. And the second one directed by Dario Argento. And the first one was the one that George did. The story was called The Case of something
I was supposed to remember? Dang it.
Yeah, well, you just watched it.
I know.
And it's a really cool story, and was one I was not familiar with, and it was a neat concept about like, there's this woman who married this older man who's on his deathbed. Obviously, married him for his money, and she's having an affair with the guy's doctor, and he does this thing where he can hypnotize. He can hypnotize the old man and like make him sign over all of the money to his soon-to-be widow.
And he also does it to help relieve his pain because he's a doctor, right?
Yeah. Well, and then, so he puts him under one of these like hypnotic trances at one point, and then the guy dies and never is taken out of the hypnotic trance. So, and he dies before she can get the money. So they end up putting the guy's body in the deep freeze in the basement. And
Which is what you do. That's standard practice.
yeah, I've got three in
That's
mind.
what you do.
And she starts freaking out because she keeps hearing voices coming from the basement. And the doctor's like, "Oh, you're just crazy. Here, take these pills and try to get some sleep, whatever." But eventually he starts hearing it too and recognizes the fact that he is still talking to them because he's in between life and death, because he was never woken up from the hypnotic trance, and so he's technically physically dead, but his soul or spirit is still there talking to him.
Super cool concept.
Yeah, it was a cool concept.
So
And,
when was this made?
like it was late 80s, early 90s. I think it came out in 91 or 92.
I've never even heard of it.
Because they
Oh,
were
man.
filming it around the time I lived in Pittsburgh. So, and that was like 90, 91. And he keeps talking about the others that are coming. So basically now his body is a vessel.
He's in the upside down, basically.
Basically, for those who speak Stranger Things. He's a vessel now for these like evil spirits that want to come into the real world.
Okay.
And then chaos ensues. So, and it's got a really cool. I don't want to give away the ending, but it's
Yeah.
a really cool ending.
Your girlfriend is the girl.
And that's just the first
Adrian
story?
Barbeau.
Adrian
Yeah, and that's
Barbeau.
just the first story. The second one
But
is what?
Before you
Sorry?
move on, but
Okay.
also a very important actor in there that shows up as the cop,
Oh yeah, it was
which will
it's
sell
a
Ted 100%.
Well, it's a total creep show reunion.
Okay.
Because it's got Adrian Barbeau in it. It's got what's his name? The guy from They're Crawling All Over You. The last story in Creep Show. E.G. Marshall. Thank you.
Yes.
He's in it. He plays the lawyer, and now I'm blanking on the boy
Oh wait,
on the cop.
Atkins.
Yeah, Tom Atkins.
Atkins
Plays the cop at the end. So it's kind of like a little Creep Show reunion.
Nice.
And even Christine Romero, who had a small part in Creep Show, and she's in it. She's in it too. A small part in it too. Anyway, but that's just my George Romero geekness coming out. So you should totally.
That's
check
just
it
the
out.
first half.
Yeah, the second half directed by Dario Argento, and to me is the last good thing that Argento
It might be.
made, because it's still full on Argento, and he does nods to a lot of Poe work. It starts off, it stars Harvey Keitel of all people, which is weird, thinking Harvey Keitel in a Dario Argento movie, but it kind of starts off. He's like this crime scene photographer, but also kind of like a photo artist at the same time. And he's taking these pictures of a crime scene where this like serial killer's been killing people all over town, and he's killed this lady with like a pendulum via Pit and the Pendulum. So there's
Okay.
a nod to that
Yeah.
right off the bat. And of course, in Dario Argento style, he has to do the POV shot of the pendulum as it's going.
Okay, yeah.
While the
back.
body's still laying there, so you go
Yeah.
right. Oh,
So
it's
you go right
so
in between
cool.
the gore, the
So
goo,
cool.
the guts, and it's awesome. And so, but basically, it's the Black Cat story, and I think it's called the Black Cat, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's the Black Cat story, but just really padded with Dario Argento-ness.
Yeah.
So, but it's a great flick. You should check it out. At moments you can really tell it was low budget. It's like nickels and dimes that George and Dario could scrape together to make it. But I love that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
Sort
on
of on
Amazon
the tail
Prime.
end of their peak, I'd say.
For both of them, really.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll stand behind anything George Romero. Even Survival of the Dead. But yeah, I can admit that. That's true. It's
It's
true.
hard for you, though, isn't it?
It is hard,
He
but it's
knows
true
it.
form of both filmmakers and their visual styles that I love up to those points. So that's number one. But I did want to also mention another one, Lucio Fulci, great Italian horror director.
He's all right.
The godfather of Italian gore, made a version of the Black Cat in 1981 that is nuts. And this is what I love about the Italians, and what also I love about Poe adaptations, that it's called the Black Cat, and it's in name only. Like there's so many adaptations
man.
out there that's just trying to capture on the Poe audience by naming their film, the Black Cat or Fallout House of Usher or whatever. But it's about this guy who's has these psychic powers, and he has this cat that he uses this cat to kill people to get revenge.
As you would do if
Yeah.
you had psychic powers.
It is a crazy movie and has nothing to do with the original Poe story except for it's got a black cat in it. And it's awesome, Fulci goodness.
When was that one made?
81.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was still during the big peak of, I think that came after Zombie and
Right.
I think right around the time of The Beyond and stuff like that. So, but yeah. So
You have a favorite?
you have a favorite
Ted?
Poe?
Well, I was just saying the Black Cat, the Master of Horror episode.
Oh yeah, yours was
Yeah.
the Master of Horror. I'm
I
sorry.
just- I'm not necessarily saying
audience.
From the
member.
audience, you have
Angela
one.
has.
Do the Mask of the Red Death with Vincent Price.
Yes.
Another Vincent Price
It's one
one,
of the
Mask
best.
of the Red Death.
That was a great
Awesome.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another, and Italian. It was set in a town in Italy.
Yep.
So-
Yep. And that came from that Corman
Roger
era of
Corman,
films.
goodness
Yeah.
times.
That's a great one. Yes.
Yep. We almost watched that, but we ended up watching Pit and the Pendulum instead
yeah.
because we had just seen a Barbara Steele film earlier in the week, and so I had to
Kind of
watch
on
it
a Barbara
again.
Steele kick. Yeah.
Yeah, just some reason, just those eyes. I don't know, but yeah. And Vincent Price in the Pit and Pendulum is such an seems like a somewhat unique version of Vincent Price because he's kind of I don't know. He's just you say it best.
His gums ache from chewing that scenery, man.
Yeah, he's just like I'm going out on this one.
His eyebrows had to hurt from all the shocked and scared expressions.
if you
he's
at
doing
home
through
could
the
see what he's
whole
doing.
movie.
Yeah,
Those eyebrows are just all over the place the whole movie. And then when he turns evil because he's been pushed too far, and that's when it's Vincent Price at his best, when he gets to be sinister, and then pulls out the pendulum and goes to town.
yeah, I was a big fan of that one.
Do you have a favorite adaptation, Edgar Allan Poe?
Yeah, I don't think I've seen many movies based off his works.
Cool. Fair enough.
Well, there were
you have some recommendations now.
Yeah, now you have a list.
I'm definitely, as far as the catalog of films based on an author, he's lower on my list. I haven't seen a lot of this stuff. I know Vincent Price is sort of synonymous with him because he's been in the big ones, almost like a perfect pairing. You almost associate those two together.
Well, it seems like the majority of that stuff came in more of the golden age,
Right.
of cinema, all the way up through the 60s, and not so much modern. But you mentioned Stuart Gordon before with that Masters of Horror. He did a full feature-length version of the Pit and the Pendulum for Full Moon back in the day too. Yes, that's right, with Lance Hendrickson and Jeffrey Combs, of course. So you should definitely check that one out too. And it's what you would expect from Stuart Gordon doing a movie of Pit and the Pendulum.
Yeah.
So. And he did Castle Freak, which is nope. That's my terrible segue into our next author of H.P. Lovecraft, because Castle Freak is H.P. Lovecraft. So we're going to talk about some H.P. Lovecraft now.
Yeah.
King of segues.
I would say, can you just sort of list which Stuart Gordon one is your favorite? Because that's what it's gonna. We're all just gonna pick a Stuart Gordon film because I feel like once again synonymous with H.P. Lovecraft and the most widely known adaptations of those.
Yeah, has Stuart Gordon done non-book adaptations? Because he's done
as a director?
Poe and H.P.
Did he direct Dolls, or was that Brian Usna?
He did direct Dolls. There you go. It's a great example.
All right.
Yeah.
Are you sure H.P. Lovecraft didn't have a Dolls?
As a director, as a writer, you could say Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Okay. I didn't.
What?
I didn't say that. You just wanted to put that trivia.
I just want to bring Honey, I Shrunk the Kids up.
Anytime you can talk about it.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft. Can you think of one that's not a Stuart Gordon movie?
Oh, shoot. I had one the other day. What was it?
I know what it is because I stole it from you.
Oh.
So you're just trying to quiz us on it?
Well, it's not. It's highly influenced. I wouldn't say it's a straight adaptation, but In the Mouth of Madness.
Oh, yeah. That's what it was.
John Carpenter.
It's
Yeah.
very influenced, and that's the thing. You can probably talk about. You can stand here and think forever on which ones are straight adaptations, but you can name movies forever that are highly influenced from Lovecraft work. Like anything Del Toro obviously has a lot of Lovecraftian.
His whole career is based on.
Yeah,
which is not a bad thing. I'm just saying,
No.
I mean, you could even argue a lot of like Tim Burton's older stuff. A lot of the
Sure,
thematic themes of it.
Yeah, I could see that. Totally.
But Stuart Gordon's sort of the king of H.P. Lovecraft adaptations.
Okay, so instead of just tippy-toeing around it, what's your favorite Stuart Gordon?
I'm going to be like super boring and just say Reanimator.
I was going to say it too.
It's really hard to top it, but
it is hard. Jeffrey Combs makes it hard to top
Yes.
that one because he's phenomenal in that movie.
But I do want to give a nod to Dagon.
See, I wasn't a fan. I mean,
Really?
We discussed that on the podcast, and that was a first time viewing for me. Cool story, cool concept. It wasn't horrible, but I think maybe if he would have directed it and been able to make it in his prime when he was giving more budgets and had, more of a budget to work on the effects and stuff, because it's a product of its time. It hurts a little bit with some of the CGI, that kind of stuff. It's not a bad adaptation. It's a very interesting story, and he does it justice. But I feel like, as far as the list of Stuart Gordon, H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, it's low on my list.
Sure.
I mean,
Which is a big list.
I feel like the first half is super solid. Like when he's kind of
Yeah.
running through that town and it's just raining all the time, and he starts running into fish people and whatnot. I feel like that stuff is super strong. But then, like as the story unfolds more and we kind of get into the third act, it really loses its luster. Especially when you get into the CGI tentacles at the end and whatnot.
Yeah, I think maybe that just completely, like, that's what stuck out to me, so it might have really hurt it towards the end, because I was into it, and I still was into it. It just sort of, that's what I remember from it most, which is not a good thing.
I think I just landed somewhere in between you two. I liked it a lot, but I don't know if I...
Well, and then I feel like as filmmaker quality goes for Stuart Gordon, again, that first half is really atmospheric.
It's strong.
Everything's like dark and wet and gloomy and
all the things you love.
Yeah. And
as an emo kid that you are.
That's right. I am.
I don't know.
Emo Phillips.
And derailed, sorry.
What?
Please finish.
What are we talking about?
Dagon. I mean, what's your favorite if you have to pick?
Dang it.
Now you just want to say something different?
You have to. No, it's probably Reanimator. It's tough. It's a hard one to beat, man. I mean, all of his stuff is great, but
there's a lot of them tied
lightning
for
in a
second.
bottle there. Yeah. I mentioned Castle Freak a minute ago. That one's
Which they're
pretty
remaking
solid.
right now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Another one I
with
wasn't a huge
Barbara
fan
Crampton.
You not a fan of that
Whoa!
one? Whoa.
of. I'm sorry, it just
He's not down with the HP.
I'm
this
not
guy.
down with what was it? Was that one a full moon? Right?
That'll do
Yeah,
it.
but technically all of them are because it was Empire Pictures was Reanimator, which was still Charles Band.
Yeah.
But it felt
has
like-
a different feel to it, though.
It does.
Well, that's because I feel like Empire Pictures was quality over quantity, and Full Moon is definitely quantity over quality.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's really hard to beat Reanimator. The sequels are great too, but
Yeah.
What about From Beyond?
I love that too. It's
Yeah.
right neck and neck with it. I
Yep.
just feel like Reanimator sort of just edges over it, but I love that too. I absolutely love that one.
Because I think, for me, Reanimator has, I feel like it's definitely. I mean, there's a lot of gooiness in From Beyond, but
Oh yeah, probably more gooiness, but I feel like maybe Reanimator has more humor to it.
that's what I was gonna say.
yeah.
For what sells it for me is the humor, and it's got that great balance. My favorite stuff is always going to be stuff that's got some levity with the horror.
I thought you were going to say goo again.
And I'll take goo all day long, but I need some relief
That's
for the
what it
horror
says on
and
his
the
dating
dismal.
profile. Yeah, that's what it says.
I feel like if Reanimator was a person, it would probably be you. It's like a perfect mix
That's right.
of
right, you got
stupid
comedy,
humor,
you got
but gore
gore.
and good performances. Still well directed movie. It's still a great movie.
Listen to him.
A great balance, like a
pitch,
good
man.
friend.
He is the hype man, after all. He really is.
And do I owe you money? What is this coming from?
You can pay me later. What's yours?
My favorite HP movie?
Yeah.
Reanimator.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite movie just in general.
Oh, really?
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool. It came in at the right time.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those ones when I showed my wife for the first time. You're like, she's either gonna love this or hate this. And then the next Halloween, she went as, the doctor. Like she had the lab coat and she put like glow stick goo in the syringe, and she had the glasses. And I'm like, this is sort of weird. I'm
Nice.
sort of like, I'm not sure how to feel about this because she went as a attractive version. So I'm like, but she had like the Jeffrey Combs glasses and the lab coat, but and it was like. I felt sort of uncomfortable about it. She even got like a cat prop that she carried around, and when you
awesome.
pressed the
that's
side,
cool.
it had the light up red eyes. I'm like,
Oh,
I'm so
cool.
proud.
That's cool.
And now you can't watch Jeffrey Combs anymore
Nope,
without
no.
getting a little,
Gets all confused. It has
Yeah.
to go.
That's why I keep talking about Jeffrey Combs and how he's my favorite in every adaptation.
Now we know why.
Anything you ask me now, I'm just whatever Jeffrey Combs is in. That's my favorite.
I'm trying really hard not to go down a dark path with this conversation.
Yeah, let's
right
not.
here. We start getting into talking about Barbara Crampton, what happens to her.
Mordred is your favorite superhero movie?
I wouldn't go that far.
Now you're back to Full Moon.
Yeah. There's a line.
I still like that one though, Dr.
Yeah.
Mordred. Yeah, I still liked it. Well, anything Jeffrey Combs.
I mean,
He
we
makes
just
everything
talked
good.
Frighteners Monday, and
Yep.
one of his best performances. You
Maybe
could do
the
a whole
best.
Jeffrey Combs episode. We could, but
I don't know if I said it on that episode recorded Monday, but I'll say it here and now. I like him more in Frighteners than I do in Reanimator.
oh, you said that was probably you
my
and Andy
favorite-
both said it was your favorite.
For every Jeffrey Combs performance. There's so much. Well, I mean, he adds a lot to any performance. Even freaking Fred Olen Ray's Phantom Empire. He
Yeah.
puts 110% into it. But just like again, like he has a physicality about him in Frighteners and in Herbert West as well. But there's just a lot going on in that character in the Frighteners that I just can't stop. Just
Yeah,
love it every time.
I mean, we've probably talked about Reanimator several times, but the Herbert West, the way he plays the guy who's so smart that he's too smart for his own good, where he doesn't know like boundaries, he doesn't have a filter, he doesn't respect life, some people say, but he actually respects life too much, maybe to the point where he's obsessed with bringing people back. But he plays that line so perfectly where he offends his roommates, he offends others, but it's not because he's a jerk. It's because he's just so smart that he doesn't think of, he's just one step ahead of everybody. His mind is going so fast, and he just plays that perfectly. Like, I feel like Herbert West was the character he was born to play.
It's like when you're driving down the street, right, and then there's that little old lady who could barely see over the steering wheel, driving 20 miles under the speed limit, and how enraged you get. That's how he feels about the rest of the human race all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like we're all just
like,
in his way.
analogy?
We're all so far away from. You guys are all going too slow mentally for me. Yeah, but yeah, and he's got one of my favorite moments in Bride of Reanimator is that scene that really kind of shows the more caring side of Herbert West is when Kathleen Kinmont goes into cardiac arrest, and he is trying everything. Herbert West is trying everything to save her life. He could just see her as another tool for his experiments,
right,
but
another free body.
Yeah, exactly. But he is really trying to save her life, and I think that's a great moment there to show the good side of Herbert West,
the human side that we don't see very often.
Yeah, exactly. But we haven't mentioned Beyond Reanimator for some reason.
I heard a laugh in the corner of the room.
Did you guys ever see that newish-ish movie what is it called? H.P. Lovecraft? What the heck's it called? Lovecraft? It's
No.
newish. I was trying to look it up. I couldn't. Yeah, it's like the name of the movie.
You're not talking the last Lovecraft, are you?
That might be it.
Oh. Yeah, I seen that movie, The Last Lovecraft, and it's more of a comedy.
Yeah,
When was that made?
That's the one I'm talking about. It was made in
maybe
2009.
about 10 years ago now, right?
2009.
Yeah, I
Like
called it.
that recent one that was made 10 years ago.
Relic of the Cthulhu.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's really funny. It's a funny movie. I was a little disappointed in it because the trailer came off funnier than the movie
They
itself.
gave away all the
but
funny parts.
I think so, yeah. Well, that and I'm going way off the rails here, but the main guy in the front poster is like this chubby guy, beard, glasses, everything. And there's a film that Jason and I saw at a film festival years ago, horribly made, but super funny. And it was mostly because of this one guy, and he looked exactly like the same guy. So I was kind of expecting the same level of humor out of the guy.
Yeah, but the writing wasn't there, so.
Yeah. So, but it's still funny, and it's all Lovecraftian influence, basically, and it's a world where the Lovecraft, everything that Lovecraft wrote was real, and so and like these guys were somehow destined to be the warriors to fight these monsters, but they're a bunch of just like slackers. So it's like a trio, I think. It was like 3 of them. So, comedy ensues. Put them in a van, go after monsters, comedy ensues.
Well, we played a movie at the Capitol probably 3 or 4 years ago around Halloween time, and I think it's the Call of the Cthulhu, and it's like it's a modern movie, but it's made to look like a very old-timey movie, and it was really well done, really cool, worth checking out.
Oh yeah, was that something at the festival? At the film festival?
No, it was actually through Gather Films. Like, they had it available for us to show, and it's, like I said, it's really cool that they did a lot with very little. They shot it so it's very dark, so you sort of see more of the silhouettes of the tentacles and that kind of stuff because they clearly didn't have the budget. And I would rather they did that trickery than actually show, because it's, it makes it look bigger than it is. It's like, it's all sort of in the dark and stuff, but they did a great job of using sort of the crutch of it feeling like old and gritty and grimy, like an old film stock, to make it sort of almost hidden. It's definitely worth checking out. It's really cool. I was sort of blown away by it.
See, and I find that fascinating about Lovecraft is there's so much of his stuff that gets adapted or influenced from or borrowed from or whatever, but we don't have like a ton of Cthulhu movies. Like, Cthulhu is such an iconic character from Lovecraft's work.
Yeah, and pop culture, like,
you could buy plushies.
You could probably go somewhere here at this event and find 10 of them somewhere. You know?
I've always wanted one of those Jesus fishes for the back of my car, but was Cthulhu.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
He became sort of like an icon, like people, nerds sort of grabbed onto and gravitate towards him as almost like a religious figure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. But it's weird that there hasn't really ever been
Put to film,
definitive-
yeah.
Yeah.
You think someone would have jumped on it right at that peak where, I mean, there was like knit hats and shirts and plushies and pop figures, everything.
Yeah.
Someone would make a big budget, like sort of fun movie based on it.
Or maybe everybody's just too scared of like not getting it right.
Well, they got the one episode of the real Ghostbusters with them, so.
That's true. Yes, even Cthulhu is in the real Ghostbusters cartoon, for crying out loud.
Except they spelled it Cthulhu, like C-A.
Yeah.
Just so people would not pronounce it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. And
Phonetically spelled.
And I think like a lot of Lovecraftian stuff is public domain as well, and so they could get away with that. I think that's why
Why don't you guys make one?
we should. Let's do a Poe meets. Let's do Poe versus like Freddy versus Jason, but it's Poe versus Lovecraft.
I was just,
I see this going horribly.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just both. sitting
Everybody's afraid to do it, because they'll do it wrong. So let's jump on it and do it wrong.
My interpretation of that is just two guys sitting at a desk on either side, just writing.
Yeah, writing to get
as fast as they can. Who can get done first?
with like a feather, a quill.
Which one's the bigger drug addict?
I'll just settle for the Pirates of the Caribbean Bill Nye character with the
And there you go.
That's like-
That's it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
close as you can get.
Is there
And
any
that
movies
turned out
about
cool.
him, like his life, like there is about Edgar Allan Poe? Is there like,
I can't think of any.
is there an actor who's actually played H.P. Lovecraft somewhere that you can think of?
Not that I can think of.
Wasn't in that Del Toro museum thing?
Yeah, there was like a statue
Yeah,
of a
he had a
character,
nice-
but I don't know what that was, if that was from anything or.
I think it was
Part
just
of
a
his
bust
collection.
because he's
Yeah.
obviously a Lovecraft fan.
Like the first thing that comes to mind if they did that would be Crispin Glover.
Ooh.
As
But he was
H.P.
kind of a
Lovecraft.
bastard, though, right? Like,
Oh,
not a
yeah, he
cool
wasn't-
Dude, so
yeah.
why
Yeah.
would you watch him support a movie about?
Well, I
an
mean,
a-hole?
there's
They just made that Motley Crue.
exactly.
Movie,
They make
so
movies
come on.
about
Bunch of
Charles
a-holes.
Manson. They make movies about despicable people all the time.
Right,
True
we'll
crime is very
make it.
popular.
Oh, and we get to cast
We'll get
Crispin
Crispin
Glover.
Glover.
Like a Bohemian Rhapsody, but with H.P. Lovecraft.
It's a musical now? What's happening?
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Rami Malek as H.P. Lovecraft. Oscar's already being made right now for that.
How are we doing on time? Where are we at?
Good in there. 5
125?
minutes left.
Oh, well, maybe we should start wrapping it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other
Honorable mentions.
honorable mentions? Classic.
Classic literature.
Lit.
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
It's good. I need to watch it again. You weren't ever a fan.
Never been a fan.
Why? It's actually pretty good, dude. It's cool to say it that you like it. There was a time where it probably wasn't cool to say you liked it, but
I should watch
Gary
it
Oldman.
again,
Oh.
but I don't know.
Visually, it's gorgeous. It can be a little bit slow, but it's so cool visually. The art direction on that movie is awesome.
And I love everything Gary Oldman, so even that Lost in Space movie.
So you'll give
know what
it
I'm
another
talking about.
try. Is what
I
you're
will
saying.
also another one honorable mention that we didn't even talk about really is Nosferatu,
Yes.
because to me now that's more unsettling than almost any take on that character, on that story. Man, is it.
That's one of the greatest monster designs of all time. Is that Max Schreck?
You put that next
Nosferatu.
to, Universal's Dracula, and to say that this is based on the same thing is sort of crazy, yeah, to think that, they are both adaptations of the same story, but they're nothing alike. Look,
Yeah. And so you bring that up, I have to give a huge honorable mention, for everybody out there in the audience today that have not seen this movie. You need to see it. It's called Shadow the Vampire.
So cool,
It's
yeah.
such a great movie because we've kind of talked about like some biopics here and there. So what Shadow the Vampire is, it is the making of the original Nosferatu, but if Max Schreck really was a vampire. And so, the cast start disappearing, and one of my favorite scenes is when he's sitting there and a couple of the drunk crew members or whatever come up and are asking him questions about being a vampire, and just out of nowhere he grabs a bat out of the air and eats it real quick. It's hilarious. But you got William Dafoe as Max Schreck as the Nosferatu character.
He's the only person to ever get nominated for an Oscar for playing a vampire that I can think of.
That's right, he did, didn't he? He did get nominated for an Oscar.
That's awesome.
And well deserved. He was amazing in it.
so good.
Yeah. And then well, I'm blanking now.
It's the director.
What's that?
John Malkovich.
John Malkovich is the director. Well, I can't remember the director's name now, but
Murnau?
what?
Murnau?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. F.W. Ronell. And then you also have Eddie Izzard in the movie.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he's awesome. And
Always
going all the
good.
way back, really far call back to when we were talking Munsters, and he was the grandpa in the 1-episode reboot of the Munsters that Brian Fuller
Holy
did.
crap.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And
Did you ever see that?
No, I never
Oh,
saw
man,
that.
I loved it.
Was that actually a series, or was that just like a little made-for-TV movie?
It was supposed to be a pilot.
I knew it was supposed to be a series, but when it actually came out...
They filmed it as a pilot, and then NBC was like, "This costs us way too much money. We can't make a series." So but they sat on it. They made it. They had all this money invested in it, so they promoted it as a Halloween special. But the intention was to make a whole series after this, and I probably still have it on my DVR. It's been a long. It's like the last thing. It's like clinging on there. I'm hoping that it doesn't disappear. But I think you probably can find it on like iTunes or Amazon Prime now. Nothing's ever really gone for good now.
Yeah, that's very true.
But it's actually really cool because it's so far removed from the original Munsters. You're not going to go back and redo it. And they tried that several times with new actors. They made like made-for-TV movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So bad, but...
Well, this isn't that one. You're not talking about that one that was with Jerry O'Connell
Yep.
playing. Oh, that's the one.
Yeah.
He was
It's like
playing Herman Munster or
Mockingbird
whatever.
Lane is what I think it was called.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Eddie Izzard plays Grandpa, and he's hilarious in it.
I so wanted to see it, but at the same time, I'm like, I look at the cast picture, right, and I'm
And
like,
they don't look like it, but
they
that's
don't look
that's
like
what's good
anything like
about
the
it, though,
Munsters.
is that to me, I'm like, it's so far removed that I'm not comparing the two. It's like, it's its own thing. It's really good.
And at the end of the day, that's what we always say when it comes to the R word.
You still have the original,
Always
too.
have the
We
original.
always have the originals. Yeah. So we should wrap things up. Any other? Do you have any other?
Well, I was just, if we're talking about Nosferatu, I'm really excited about our new sponsors show. Nosferatu is coming to Shudder.
Show
It's aired on
there.
AMC, and now it's going to Shudder.
Yep. Did you see it when it was on AMC?
Not any of it, no.
Okay.
It's airing. I think it just either
It just
aired its
start-
finale or is just finishing now. So as the finale wraps, the first episode will be hitting Shudder, so you can catch it again. It will be on Shudder, and I think they're putting them up one episode at a time,
Yep.
not like
Every
you can't
Thursday,
binge
it
it.
said, yep.
Yeah.
And those who were interested in seeing this show, and I watched the trailer just last night, and I'd never knew anything about it, and it looks crazy. It looks insane. But the spelling of it's really weird. It's basically the spelling of a license plate. So it's like NOS, the number 4.
Like a teenage girl texted it to someone.
That's exactly
you
what
go.
it is.
That's
and I think that's why it kind of flopped on AMC.
Yeah, because people don't get
They didn't
it
know
at all.
what it was,
I saw a
and-
headline actually. After the first episode aired, it was like Nosferatu not too good. Like they mocked it in the headline. I'm like, man, that was harsh, but pretty clever.
And it's either based on a Joe Hill book or he
yeah.
wrote the series. I can't remember which. And for those who don't know, Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. What's that? Oh, you wrote the book. Okay. Cool. Okay, well, that's it for us, but I want to take us out with a couple things. Thanks, everybody, for coming out.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to thank Lib Con for having us here in the Iowa City Public Library.
This is such a cool
Very
event.
Super cool event,
We're having
guys.
a blast. This is such a good time. And I want to, kind of throw out there, if you enjoyed this and want to hear our show again, you can check us out on the Prescribed Films Podcast Network. That's thepfpn.com. And also, we have a Patreon. If you go to Patreon and put in AOTKP, We have different tiers, and you can get even more Attack of the Killer podcast if you became a Patreon supporter. We post our regular shows every other week, but if you are a Patreon supporter, you could actually get a bonus episode on the opposite week of the show. So you could get us in your lives every week. But there's also like special videos that we do.
And the bonus episodes have been becoming almost as long as everyone else's regular episodes.
The last one for sure. And also some more information about Attack of the Killer podcast. We are also going to be doing another live show at Monster Fest, September 14th.
Midwest Monster Fest.
Midwest Monster Fest in Moline, Illinois. And also we will be doing our Trailer-thon series. Now what Trailer-thon is how many people are familiar with Mystery Science Theater 3000?
Or Riff Tracks.
Or Riff Tracks. So we do a live kind of Mystery Science Theater thing, a Riff Tracks thing, where we do funny commentary over some really crazy and bad movie trailers. And so we will be doing that at Halloween-a-Palooza, which is our own event that we do in Ottumwa, Iowa, October 11th and 12th. And we'll be doing Trailer-thon on the 12th.
So never say there's nothing to do.
Palooza, it's a big 2-day event that we do that has like vendors, guest celebrities, International Film Festival, a lot of other events we have going on. We try to pack those 2 days with so much stuff that you cannot do it all. We're going to have Alex Vincent there, the guy who played Andy from the original Child's Play movie. He'll be there signing autographs and stuff, and
bringing a screen-used Chucky doll to take pictures with too.
Mm-hmm.
So Chucky's the real guest, and he's just bringing him.
Yeah, Chucky's bringing Andy. Yeah. And then also we have our if you want to chat with us, don't miss out on our merch table over there. We have shirts and seasons of Attack of the Killer podcast on discs at the table that you can get there, but also buttons. Yep. And we also have we also make movies. Our company, Prescribed Films, and we have our movies for sale there as well, plus a comic book that I do. So we keep very, very busy. Yeah, but thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
Attack of
us,
the Killer
too.
podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.